Hey everybody, welcome to another tutorial. This time we're going to be covering the Phoenix module for a master password. So if you haven't watched my modules getting you started as well as the Phoenix hooks getting started videos, you should go watch those now before proceeding. I'll link to those videos in the description. So for the master password module functionality, basically what we're looking to do is make it so that a store owner can go to the login page of their site, type in an email address for one of their customers, and then type in a master password that will let them log in to any account for any customer. And then in the admin side, we're going to make it so that there's an actual module where you can change that master password and you can restrict that ability to an IP address or multiple IP addresses. So let's get started. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to copy an existing module. As I've said before, that's usually the easiest way I find to get started. The product title module under header tags is probably the best fit. So the reason we're going to choose header tags is because the header tags are loaded pretty high up in the stack. If we were to go look at templates and go into the components here and go look at the template top, the header tags are almost as high as you can get into the stack. Now building a module, we have to basically, in this case, we tie into this. If we were building a hook, we could go a little bit higher into inject site start or into system. But being that we're building a module, we're limited to the different types of modules that are defined. So there is a header tags type module. Typically header tags will put tags in the head, but we're actually going to manipulate data. We're not actually going to put anything into the head tags. I just want to build the module so it's as high in the stack as possible. If we look at the product title, we're going to basically clone this module and then change it to suit our needs. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it, and we're going to change this to HT, which stands for header tags, master password. So there we've got our master password file, and then we'll come back that in a second. We're going to go under languages. Again, with modules, typically there is a matching language file for each module. It doesn't have to be, but if if you're doing it the way you should be to make sure that different languages have the opportunity to use your module, it's always just good practice to always have a language file. So we copied the product title, so we'll copy that one as well. Okay. So now we've got that. So we've got both of these two files. So if we look back down, again, I'm using PHP Storm. I can see right away that the class name is broken. Class name should match the file name. So if I just fix this, master password, now it's happy. So execute is what the module will do once we get to that point. That's where the heavy lifting is going to be. We'll come back to that. So I'm just erasing that for now. The get parameters, we're going to want to utilize that. The one thing we're going to want to also do is we can't leave module header tags product title in here because that's what's being used for the product title page that we cloned. If we leave that there, it'll actually create some conflicts because it's going to overwrite, when this module is enabled, it's going to overwrite the settings of the product title module. And it could even, if both were enabled, it could declare those variables twice as constants, which would be a problem as well. So we're going to basically take product title and we're going to replace that with master password, place all. And then we're going to switch over this one and do the same here. We don't need that. Again, that's specific to SEO, which is not anything to do with master passwords. So we don't need that. So now, right now, these are the settings that were used for product titles. So if I just go back here and we look at the header tags product title and edit this, you can see that there's the enabling of the module true or false, there's a sort order, and there's the SEO title override. So that's why what we're seeing here. We don't need the SEO title override. What we do need is to go under status. We're going to change this to say enable master password module. Do you want to allow product titles to be added to the page tile? So this again would be, do you want to allow admins to log in as users? True and false, so that's fine. Master password sort order. So sort order is required. It's by most modules. I would always leave it there. It's a good practice. I'm just going to make it default to 10. If I look at these, they're all higher defaults, so that's fine. We're also going to clone this, and I'm going to password. So this will be the actual password that we're going to type in. I'll leave it blank. Okay. I'm actually going to move this up above the sort order. It will ask these questions in order, and typically the sort order is, it's at the bottom. I'm going to add another question, and I'm going to call this one IP list. We'll say IP restrict and enter. Say enter a comma delimited list of IP addresses that can access this tool. If left blank, any IP will be able to use this master password. Okay, so we've got the settings that we need. That's pretty much all we need right there. We're going to adjust some of this as we go. Let's just see where we are right now. In here, we're going to change the language file and call this master password. That's the name of the actual module. And allows admins to access client accounts. Okay, so if we go back and say install module, and we go look for master password and install the module and edit it, I can see that I have the master password. I can turn it on or off. I can enter a password, test123. I can enter an IP address and the sort order. If I save that, I can see that it saved it all. I can edit it, save it. So the functionalities, the basic functionality is there. So now we need to start thinking about what else do we need to be able to do with this. So with the password, the one thing, of course, we want to do is we want to make sure that we encrypt that password. We don't want to leave it in clear text. So in order to do that, we're going to have to get a little bit creative here. So for the master password, we're going to use an extra function here called setfunc. Oops. And we are going to call this master, and I'm just making this up, password encrypt. Now, when you use the setfunc or set function under your get parameters, you always leave an open parens, open bracket, because this function will actually add some stuff and then close the function for you. So you don't close it off, you leave it open. If there was parameters you wanted to pass into it, you can do that, but then you would leave it so that the rest can be appended by PHP functions that utilize this. So, and we're also going to put in a use function, and we're going to call this one master password show. Now this one doesn't have the open bracket. So basically what this is going to do is call a couple of PHP functions I'm going to write. So we have the class right here. The class ends down here. I'm actually going to cheat. This is a good way of getting your functions into the module without having to create additional files and include them. You can actually put the functions right in the same file as your module. So I'm going to say function, and I'm also going to create one for the master password show. So if I now go to master password and edit it, so here's a perfect example. The reason why I don't see my changes is because I've already got this module installed, and when I installed it, the set func and the use func were not part of this description of get parameters, and as a result these were not saved into the database. So even though I've changed my code, the module is unaware of those changes. So the only way to solve that is to remove the module, install the module back in, and now it's working. So you'll notice I don't see anything here, and that's because we told it that to set the function, we're going to use master password encrypt, which is going to do everything it needs to encrypt the value and show the value for editing purposes. And then master password show, that is the function that will show the value underneath here. So if I was to go master password show and I just said return ABC123 and refresh this, now I see ABC123. So this is entirely used just to show the existing value or whatever we want to show to the user, the administrator looking at that module. What we're going to do here is basically say return if empty, and we're going to go to our password, because if you remember, once this module is saved and loaded into memory, each of these becomes a constant variable loaded by the database. So if this is empty or hasn't been set yet, then we want to say empty. Otherwise, we want to show encrypted. So now if I refresh this, it says empty because we haven't set it yet. Now if I click edit, I don't have a box here for the master password, so we have to write that right now as a function. So basically, we're going to make it look like this. We're going to say the value is going to be the value of that constant. So that becomes the value. Now we're going to create a here doc block. So if I go HTML equals Phoenix currently uses Bootstrap, so as a result I'm going to write some HTML with Bootstrap in mind. So we're going to create a div with a class of row. We're going to create a div inside of that, the class of column 12, padding horizontal 3, and we'll create an input type for now, we'll put it in as text. Name, we're going to call it configuration. Now this is a this is the way that Phoenix typically this is the way Phoenix typically names all of their input fields. So if I was to go back here and edit this, and I was to view the source and go look at one of these fields, you'll notice that they're all called configuration, and then they've got the constant value in there, so that when this form is submitted, you have a configuration array with each of the keys in it. So that's basically what I'm doing here. I got configuration, and then I've got the constant name. So then class, we're going to do form control. Value, we're going to put in our value from up top there. So that'll get the value of the constant into our input field. We're going to create an ID, and I'm just going to call this master password field. Now you want to keep this unique, obviously. So we will, for now, finish that. So now if we were to we still don't have the master password there, and that's because I have forgotten to return our HTML to the method. So if I refresh now, we have our master password in there. So if I was to save this, it says encrypted now because it's no longer empty. If I edit it, it just says AAA. It's still not encrypted. Our logic thinks that it should be by now, but we still have to get there. So I can change this, then edit that. So basically what it's doing again is when we edit it, it's calling the set function, which is master password encrypt. It goes to master password encrypt, gets the value of this out of the database, saves it to value, creates an HTML block that is a row that's the full width of 12. Again, if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, I do plan on doing some Bootstrap videos, but for now you just have to go to getbootstrap.com and do some reading or watch some other YouTube videos for that. So then we've got our configuration, we've got the same name, and we've got the ID, which we're going to use in a minute, and the values. So when we save that form, that's where it's grabbing this value when we save the form in the configuration array, and it's going into the database. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that when we save it, it's actually going to encrypt it. So there's a couple of things that we got to do to make that happen. Basically, we're going to create another input field. This one's going to be, and we'll actually put this text for now. We'll switch that later. We're going to call this master password change. And the name, we'll also call it master password change. And the value we'll put in there is 0. Oops. Okay, so if we go back here, refresh, we now have this 0 field in there. So what we want to do is, if somebody enters some text in here, we want to make sure that when they click save, it encrypts that and saves it into the database. But if somebody were to come back in here, once it's encrypted and click edit, and they have the encrypted password and they simply want to change the IP address and click save, we don't want to re-encrypt the encrypted password again. We want it to know that the password's changed if it's changed, but if it hasn't changed, then we don't want to change the password and re-encrypt it a second time and a third time and a fourth time, because it won't work if we do that. We only want to encrypt it the first time that it's typed in. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that this master password change turns to 1 when we change this field. And then when we save it, we'll check the value of this. And if it's 1, we'll encrypt it. If it's not 1, we won't encrypt it. Okay, so the way we're going to have to do this is we're going to have to say on the password field, on change, actually we'll do on key up equals, and we will call master password change. Now, this is actually not going to be a PHP function. This is going to be a JavaScript function. So one way we can cheat here is, since we already have an HTML block going, we could just put script tags in here and put a function right there. So this will load right into the DOM with the page. So what we're going to want to do here is we want to if key up, meaning that they're typing into the password field. We then want to change the value of this. So we're going to use jQuery, and we're going to say the value of that field is now going to become 1. And we want to change the password field. If we change this to password so that we can't see the password if you're editing it, we want to take this field and we want to change the attribute of type to equal text. So that'll do is when they change this password, it's going to change the value of this field to 1, and it's going to change the type of the password box to text, just so that they can see what they're typing in there. You know, that's controversial. If you didn't want to do that, you could leave that out. You know, if you're going to leave that out, you probably want to have a second password box where they can confirm the password is being typed in correctly. This is just a quick way of getting around that measure. So if this works, we'll see here. So it's password block. If I type in here, it converts it to text, and it changed this to 1. So again, I'll refresh this. If I type in here, it changes it to text, and it changes that to 1. So now that we know that that's working, I'm going to change this type of this box, of this input box, to hidden. So when we refresh this, that 1 goes away. It's still there, it's just not visible. Okay, so that's working. The next thing I want to do, this is just an add-on, basically going to create another row. And we'll make this so it's got a padding of 4 all around. And I'm going to say your IP, and we'll put in the magic variable of server, and we'll put in remote address. And so now if I refresh, I can see what my IP address is, which is just handy for what's coming. For the IP restrict, it just gives you that IP address that you could copy in there if you wanted to, which is handy. So now we've got this fully functional as far as encrypting the password, or sorry, presenting the password and being able to type it in. We still have to catch the master password change variable and then decide if it's 1, what do we do with it? So the only way we can do that is actually, unfortunately, with a hook. I don't know of a way to get it so that if we were to go into the module file itself, so if I go under admin and I go to modules, you'll see here that the application top is being loaded, and then it gets into the pre-action, which is where we're going to target for our hook. And then it gets into the save function. So I don't have any other way to get in above this save function and encrypt that password before it commits it to the database. So I'm going to target this pre-action in order to get that working. So we're going to have to go create a hook. So if I go under includes hooks, we're going to go under admin. We're going to create, we only want this under the modules area. So we're going to create a folder called modules. And under there, we'll create a new PHP file called master password. And then we're going to create a class, hook, admin, modules, master password. Okay. So then we're going to say function, listen, pre-action. So again, because this hook is targeted at admin modules, it's only going to load in the modules area. If I open up the modules file, I want to create the hook so that it's loaded before the save. And so there's a hook right here called pre-action. So that's why we're saying listen pre-action in modules in the admin. And the master password has to match our master password.php file. So that should work. If there was any, if you want to see this, you can just, if you want to test if you're doing the right thing at this point, you can just echo something to the screen and then save and watch for the AAA to show up at the top of the screen. So we know that the hook is functional and it's coming in at the right time. So we are going to want to say if not empty and use the magic variable of post. If you don't know what post is, there's a lot of videos that would explain that in PHP, but basically when we save our form, it posts that form to the server, and as a result, all of the values of post are committed. So if I was to say var dump so this, if I edit and then if I save, I will get nothing. However, if I put a die in here and I save this, I'll get an output of all of the form data. So there I can see my master password change is 0. Okay. And I can see what all of the other settings of that form are. So if I go back here and take die out of there and take that out of there. So we're going to say if not empty post master password change. So if master password change was set to 0, it wouldn't run what's inside of here, being that if it's set to 1, so if we've changed the password, it's going to then encrypt it. So we probably also want to say, and if not empty, because we don't want to encrypt. I'm just going to copy this. We do not want to encrypt the password if the password is empty. So basically we're checking to see if master password change is not empty, and if the configuration module header tags master password is also not empty. Then we're going to take the value, or we're going to set the value of the master password to equal password hash. And we're going to take the master password that was submitted, and we're going to set that to password default. So you can look up on the PHP site to see what that does, but basically it's going to hash with the server default algorithm the password that's being entered in, and it's going to assign that to the same variable. So if we were to look at this variable, if we echoed this out here, the value of it would be what our password is prior to being encrypted, and if we echoed it out down there, we'd get what it is after it's encrypted. So then what's going to happen is this pre-action is going to call that hook. It's going to capture the password if it's changed. It's going to encrypt it, and then it's going to go into save, and it's going to save that value into the database encrypted. Okay, so that's our hook. That's all we need to do for it. So just clean it up a little bit. So now if we go back here, that will all work. If we want to test that out, we can refresh this page. Okay, so if I edit this and I say test 1, 2, 3, I save that. It says encrypted. If I edit it and I just key down on that, I get the encrypted password. So then, yeah, you could get a lot fancier with how this works. But at the end of the day, that's functional for the amount of times that the administrator would be changing the master password. It's probably going to be set once. It's probably a good idea to change it more than once, but it's probably only going to be set every once in a while. Okay, so the next step is going to be the execute area of the module. So right now, if I was to go log in, and if I typed in my test 1, 2, 3, it doesn't log me in. So in this execute area, if you remember, this is a header tags master password, which resides in the module header tags. Header tags are actually loaded into the front end of the website, not the admin side. So this execute is where we're going to actually run the logic that creates checking of the password, the checking of the IP address, and if both are valid, logging into the user's account based on that. So we are going to start with checking the base name. We want to make sure that this is only going to be loaded in the login page. Oops. So if I do script name is equal to login.php. So basically it's going to check and make sure that we're on the login page. As long as we are, it's going to run this code. Otherwise, it's just going to ignore it. And that way it doesn't pollute any other areas of our site. If not empty, the post. And if not empty, oops. And it'll be email address. So where we're getting that from is, if we look at the source, this field here is actually called email_address. So we want to make sure that that can't be empty to log in. We don't want anybody trying to do that. And we want to make sure that we're not empty on the password as well. So as long as all of that is in good order, so they're logging in with a valid username and password, or it's not blank. Now, one thing we're going to do is we're going to say allow IP is equal to 0. We're then going to say if not empty, and we're going to go grab the master IP list. So if they haven't entered in an IP address, then it's going to ignore this block. Otherwise, it is going to check to make sure that the IP address of the user is in that list. So to do that, we're going to say IPs. We'll go explode. Explode will take a variable. So in this case, we're going to separate using commas the IP list. And as a result, we will get an array from whatever's in that file or in that input field. And then we're going to say if in array, and we're going to use the magic variable of server remote address. And we want to know if that is in the array of IPs. And if it is, allow IP is going to equal 1. If the module IP list is empty, so here if it's not empty, it's going to check and see if the remote address of the user is in the IPs list, which is an exploded list from the value that was entered in here. So if I edit this, so if this was 192.168.1.2 as well as 192.168.3.4, and I save that. So basically now we're going to take, we've got the remote address being checked out. As long as that IP address matches the IP list, then it's going to allow them in. If the IP list is empty, then we also want to let them in. So the only time it's going to secure it by IP address is if there's IP addresses in the list. Okay, so then we are going to say if not empty, the IP, allow IP, and not empty the master password, because we want to make sure that we do not allow somebody to log in if the master password is empty, because that would be a security hole. Now we're going to say if password verify, and we're going to check the post password, and we're going to check that against the password that's saved in the database. So what this will do is, again, our hook encrypted the password using the server default algorithm. What password verify does is it takes the password that's being entered in here and it checks to see if it's hashable to the password that's saved in the database. And if it is, it's going to confirm that the password was typed in correctly. Otherwise, it will not enter any of this code that we're going to put in here. So we're going to say query and we're going to say select star from customers where customers email address is equal to post email address. So we're going to check and see what the user's email address matches. So whatever they've typed in here, it's going to get that particular account. We're also going to say limit 1, just in case there's multiple accounts with the same password. You could deal with that too and loop through them if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that for this example. So then I'm going to say cust equals db fetch array and query. So then that cust becomes the value of the array from the customer. So we want to check and make sure that that's not empty. So if there's no matching record, we're not going to do anything. But if cust is not empty, that means it did find a customer matching that email address. Keep in mind, we've already verified that the password typed in matches our master password, and that the IP address that we're coming in from is either in the allowed list, or we're letting all IP addresses in. So there is security wrapped around this. This does look pretty scary when you look at, just loading a customer's data from the email address provided, but it's only going to let us into this inner block if everything else is in order. So now we're going to say globals login customer ID is equal to, and we'll just type it as an integer, customers ID. Then we will also add the session customer ID to equal the same value. We'll then do a redirect. Oops. Okay, so that will take us a redirect, and that will force it to log in or redirect to the main page. So if we did everything right there, if I was to type in test123 and click sign in, and it logs us in. So now if we go back to here, and we go into master password, edit this, and if I was to change the IP address, then go back and log out, log back in, it does not log me in. If I go back to the admin tool, change this back to my IP address, save this, back here, refresh, it does log me in. So we know that that functionality is all working. Again, if we were to erase this, we know that that would also work. So at the end of the day, we now have a master password tool. We can log into any customer that we want simply by entering in their email address and by entering in our master password. There is a place on phoenixaddons.com. I'll put a link to that in the description if you're interested, where you can get this module. I've already written this once, so I just thought I'd run through it for a video. Subscribe to our channel and give the video a like if you felt this video taught you something. By subscribing and liking the video, you really do help me out as I'm trying to build this YouTube channel and get some content in here. I do plan on creating a whole bunch of PHP, CSS, JavaScript, and SQL, and all kinds of different more broader topic videos as I go, so that should be a help for everybody. So more videos to come in several areas. If you have ideas for videos, please leave comments in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you. Just give me some feedback. Thanks for watching, and until next time.